Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
And I'm Jacob.
And Jacob continues to be with us while we're waiting for Stephanie to come back. And we begin the month of January here. Well, we've already begun it, but we've got a couple of days behind us. But for today, we're a little hungry, aren't we?
We are. And we're going to have, well, wasabi. Now, Tom, do you like wasabi?
Well, I don't really know because I don't know if I've actually had the real thing or not. I have the wasabi that they serve at those huijuan, what are they called?
Sushi Express.
Yeah, Sushi Express, there you go. Or some of the other sushi restaurants in town. But someone told me that that's not the real thing, okay? They wouldn't serve the real thing because the real thing is actually quite expensive and difficult to prepare.
Yes. Now, well, how about the fake stuff then, if you want to call it that? It's green, right? And you kind of squeeze it out of the little packet and maybe add a little soy sauce to it, and you use it to eat your sushi, right?
Certainly, I like spicy food, so yes, I have that stuff. But yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that the wasabi they're eating in most restaurants is probably not the real thing. It's probably got a small percentage of wasabi in there, but certainly not 100%. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And we're trying to answer the question, is your wasabi the real deal? Is it the real thing? So let's get into this. Let's listen to the entire contents of our lesson now one time.
You've probably enjoyed sushi with salty soy sauce, pickled ginger, and spicy wasabi. However, unless you are at a very high-end restaurant in Japan, you likely had imitation wasabi paste or powder. The ingredients of this are European horseradish, mustard powder, and green food coloring, with typically only 1 to 3% real wasabi. Real wasabi comes from the underground stem of a plant that's native to Japan. This plant is in the same family as radish, horseradish, and mustard plants. It requires incredibly specific conditions in mountain river valleys to grow, and crops can easily fail. That's why real, fresh wasabi is so costly and rare. In fact, it's so expensive that even in Japan, 95% of all wasabi sold is imitation wasabi. Is your wasabi real or fake? If the texture is a thick paste, it's fake. In contrast, if it's in small, coarse pieces, it might be real. Fresh wasabi should be consumed immediately, as it loses its flavor within 15 minutes of being crushed. As for taste, imitation wasabi is mainly spicy and hot. Real wasabi is spicy, but has more of a fresh, signature taste that isn't too intense, with the delicate flavor of fish. Try to taste real wasabi at least once. Now that you know how unique it is, you'll appreciate it even more.
Okay, everybody, let's get to it. Let's talk about the contents of today's lesson. The title is a question. Is your wasabi the real deal? So this is a term here, the real deal, which means the real thing. Is it genuine? Is it 100% of what it's supposed to be? We use the word deal here just because it rhymes with the word real, real deal. Deal just kind of means like a business deal or something like that. But for practical purposes here, real deal just means the real thing.
That's right. Now, the first sentence says, you've probably enjoyed sushi with salty soy sauce, pickled ginger, and spicy wasabi. Okay, so yeah, if you go to a sushi restaurant here in Taiwan, and the things that you eat with your sushi are salty soy sauce, pickled ginger, and spicy wasabi. These are kind of the flavors that you can add to your sushi.
Exactly. So those items will come along the conveyor belt if you're in such a restaurant. And so we've got soy sauce, of course, it's salty. And we've got pickled ginger. Ginger, of course, is a root plant. And if it's pickled, it's treated in a chemical and stored in jars or something until it ferments and things like that. So you can get ginger shreds, I call them. I'm not sure if that's the proper term, but you can add those to your sushi there. And, of course, spicy wasabi goes with it. However, unless you were at a very high-end restaurant in Japan, you likely had imitation wasabi paste or powder. So unless you were at a high-end restaurant, okay, only if you were in a restaurant in Japan that's high-end, then you might have real wasabi paste, but you weren't, so unless you were in a high-end restaurant, then otherwise you had imitation wasabi paste or powder. So if something's imitation, that means it's not the real thing. It's just made in a laboratory with certain chemicals that make it taste and smell like wasabi, but it isn't the real thing.
Right, it's fake, which isn't good, but, well, sometimes an imitation can be okay. It's just not the real thing. And remember, this is a high-end restaurant that serves real wasabi. High-end means very classy, very expensive. The dishes are very expensive in this restaurant. You might have to dress up, put on a suit or a tie or a dress or something like that if you go to a high-end restaurant. It's not something that we would go to every day. Maybe for very special occasions, you would go to a high-end restaurant and you would enjoy a very expensive meal there. Okay, so you probably have had imitation wasabi paste or powder. That's that green stuff that we squeeze out of the packets there. The ingredients of this are European horseradish, mustard powder, and green food coloring, with typically only 1 to 3% real wasabi. Okay, here we're listing the ingredients of the imitation wasabi paste or powder. The ingredients, of course, are the things that go into making a dish or a food item, let's say. So the ingredients are European horseradish. That's a funny word, isn't it? Horseradish. It's kind of a plant, and it has a very strong flavor. When do we usually eat horseradish? I don't even know if it's very common here in Taiwan, horseradish. Do we have many dishes with horseradish in them?
I haven't seen it here in Taiwan, but I know my mother liked to eat it with raw vegetables. She would have it with celery and radishes and things like that. So it's kind of a spicy sauce, and it's, of course, from the horseradish plant, which is, I think, a member of the cabbage family, as is the mustard plant. So, yeah, you're going to have horseradish there. It's kind of like a spicy sauce there. And mustard, of course, you know what that is. And they're having mustard in the powder form here. And then, of course, you've got coloring, which is some kind of chemical that gives the wasabi the green color, but it's, of course, artificial. It's not real. And then you only get 1 to 3% real wasabi. So I suppose since they're calling this wasabi, they've got to put some wasabi in there, but it will be only a small portion, only 1 to 3% wasabi. So at least you're getting something.
Right. You're exactly right. Taiwan is pretty strict about naming things. Like if it doesn't contain any of that ingredient, you of course can't call it that or you'll get in trouble. Companies will be fined lots of money for what is essentially fake advertising, right? They're advertising a product as, oh, this is wasabi. Well, oh, hang on. It doesn't contain any wasabi. You can't call it that. And then you have to pull the product from the shelves and you might get in trouble. You might get fined if you're a company and you do that. So, real wasabi comes from the underground stem of a plant that's native to Japan. Okay, so we talked about the imitation wasabi in the first paragraph. In the second paragraph, we start to talk about real wasabi. Well, where does it come from? It comes from the underground stem of a plant that's native to Japan. If something is native to a place, that means it's where it's from, or it's where you can find it. Kiwis are native to New Zealand. Of course, kiwi could be the fruit, that interesting fruit that you kind of slice open and eat the green or yellow stuff inside, fruit inside. The kiwi fruit, and there's also a kiwi bird. Those are both native to the country of New Zealand. So here, the wasabi plant is native to Japan. That's where it comes from.
Or I could say papaya is native to South America. That's where it came from. So yes, this particular plant is native to Japan. Although I heard somewhere that wasabi also grows in Alishan, and Alishan is famous for its wasabi. That's what I've heard. But in any case, we're talking about this plant that is native to Japan. This plant is in the same family as radish plants, horseradish plants, and mustard plants. And radish, horseradish, and mustard, I believe those are all members of the cabbage family. And it requires incredibly specific conditions in mountain river valleys to grow, and crops can easily fail. So it needs very specific conditions, okay? Very strict conditions, and they have to be in mountain river valleys. They cannot grow anywhere else. You probably cannot grow it on your balcony at home here in Taipei. It's just not going to work because it requires specific conditions. So specific means very clear and with definite details, okay? So you need to have specific information if you want to, say, start a business or something like that. It can't be vague or general information. It's got to be very specific. Please be specific. Tell me the exact number.
Right. So if you get home late from school and your parents ask you, hey, where were you? And you're like, well, I don't know. I kind of was walking home and I went to this place and that place. They might say, be specific. We need to know, what you did. Where were you? Don't be vague. You have to be specific. Okay, so crops can easily fail. So it's hard to grow. You need very specific conditions or exact conditions in mountain river valleys to grow, and crops can easily fail. If a crop fails, that means you plant it, and when you go to dig it up or when you go to harvest it, there's no crop there anymore. Maybe something happened, the weather wasn't right, there wasn't enough rain, for example. And then, you don't get the crop. The crop has failed. That's why real, fresh wasabi is so costly or so expensive and rare. It's really hard to find. In fact, it's so expensive that even in Japan, 95% of all wasabi sold is imitation wasabi. So even in the home of wasabi, where it is native to, 95% of all wasabi sold there is fake. It's imitation.
Wow, that's kind of surprising because I thought they really stressed quality in Japan, but I suppose imitation wasabi is tasty in of itself, so they can't be too bad, but the point is real wasabi is hard to find, it's rare, and it's going to be very expensive, and it's only going to be served at high-end restaurants. Okay, that brings us to the midway point in today's lesson. Let's take a break now and listen to our Chinese teacher.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们今天要来看一种食物，它其实是类似一种调味料的东西，它就是一种很香，而且喜欢的非常喜欢，不喜欢非常不喜欢的就是 Wasabi。那文章一开始他有提到说其实大家可能都很喜欢啦，就是喜欢芥末的人都很喜欢，大概是酱油啦，还有姜Wasabi这些东西来配着可能是寿司啦、握寿司啦之类的，或者是生鱼片之类的东西。但是出现了第一格呢，不晓得考什么之后，在整个第一格的前面先出现了一个 however， 后面我们看到动词都用的是过去式，而且句子讲的是你在日本非常高档的餐厅逗点，你可能吃到仿制的山葵酱或者是山葵粉。所以我们来看一下第一题有4个选项，第一 A 的 unless 是除非 if not， 除非是在那种条件，否则就如何如何。那么 B 选项的 once 如果当连接词的话，它指的是一旦如何如何，就是 when 的功能。 C 如果当连接词 yet 就是有 but 的语义，但是比较强调然而怎样。那么 D 的 until 呢，则是直到什么时间为止，它强调的那个是时间之前的一个状态。所以我们根据文意应该要选 A， 除非你当时是在非常高档餐厅，要不然逗点之后 likely 是很可能，你可能吃到的是假的 wasabi 因为 wasabi 它就像我们接下来所说的， 通常因为很贵，所以它大概就是用一些色素啊、芥末粉啊、欧洲辣根啊之类的东西来调出来。那么 Wasabi 为什么会很贵呢？我们继续来看到第二段。因为其实 Wasabi 啊，它真正的这种所谓的山葵，它是来自于日本本土土生土长的一种 Wasabi， 就是一种地下茎。我们看一下第二段第一句，它有一个限定用法的关系子句，先行词就是这个地下茎 ，the underground stem of a plant。那么关系子句从 that 一直到句尾的地方，那么就是因为呢，它是这个土生土长的，在关系子句括号里面看到一个 native 这个形容词，它是土生土长，从日本那边种，而且重点是啊，它的生长的条件非常的特殊，一定要在山区的河谷当中非常特殊的条件之下才能生长。所以常常有时候就长不出来，就会有一点稀有。那就是为什么真正的山葵啊会如此的怎么样，而且稀有的关系。第三句我们在这一段第二段当中其实看到的是incredibly specific conditions， 非常特别的生长环境，跟下面这一句话第四句的 That's why 做了一个呼应。因为第二格考你的是一个形容词，注意哦，第二题 A、B、C、D 的选项都是形容词哦，你不要看到 ly 就以为是副词。在英文当中有很多 ly 结尾的字都是形容词。好，那么第二格我们看到第二格后面有一个 and， 所以稀有昂贵跟右边的最后一个字的 rare 其实刚好是一个呼应，那就是为什么真正的 wasabi 是这么样的昂贵。
We're going to take a short break now, but please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, let's resume our lesson. So again, we're trying to answer the question, is your wasabi the real deal? Or as it says here in the following paragraph, is your wasabi real or fake? And of course, we did mention the word imitation, which means the same thing as fake. Sometimes, of course, I don't know if they still do this, but I used to take trips over to Hong Kong many years ago, and someone would come up to me and say, hey, would you like to buy a fake Rolex?
Oh, yeah.
I was always insulted because I thought, hey, what makes you think I can't afford a real Rolex? Do I look like a beggar or something like that? But indeed, Hong Kong used to be famous for its fake Rolexes. I don't know if they sell them anymore. But yeah, the question is your wasabi real or fake? Or is it genuine or imitation?
Okay, so let's take a look at this question. Is your wasabi real or fake? If the texture is a thick paste, it's fake. Okay, so that should be our first clue right now. What is its texture? How does it feel? How does it feel in your mouth? Or if you touch it, how does it feel? And if it's a thick paste, well, then we know that it's fake. And of course, we already explained in the beginning of the article, the wasabi that we get at the sushi restaurants here in Taiwan, for the most part, well, it's fake. You squeeze it out of a packet and yeah, it's not real wasabi based on this. Okay, so a paste, a thick paste. Paste is kind of like between a liquid and between a solid, let's say. It's not like water. It's much thicker than a liquid, but then it's not hard either if it's a paste. Think of toothpaste, right? Toothpaste, what you squeeze onto your toothbrush when you brush your teeth. Toothpaste, it's not really a liquid, but it's not a solid either. If you put it on your teeth and move the brush around, it's going to, smooth out and get thinner on your teeth.
Right. I remember when I made spaghetti many years ago, I used tomato paste as opposed to tomato sauce because the sauce is thinner and runnier. The paste is thicker, as like you said, like toothpaste. So in this particular case, you're going to get this paste inside those little packets at those sushi restaurants. And in contrast, or the opposite of that, if it's in small, coarse pieces, it might be real. So if something's coarse, that means it's not fine. Okay, fine means it's ground into a fine powder. But if it's coarse, it's kind of lumpy and it's not very consistent. Some pieces are big, some pieces are small. So coarse, like a gravel road would be coarse because you've got all these different rocks there, whereas a dirt road would be more fine because it's just dirt, which is like powder.
Right. Think of salt, right? If you have a salt shaker and you just can shake some salt onto your meal, then that salt will be very fine, right? But if the salt is in bigger pieces, like almost tiny rocks, you'll need a salt grinder. And that's when you actually turn the top of the salt device, let's say, and it kind of grinds it up into smaller pieces, and then it can then fall onto your food. So yeah, so things like sand, things like salt can be either fine or coarse.
Exactly.
So if it's coarse pieces, then, well, it might be real. Fresh wasabi should be consumed immediately as it loses its flavor within 15 minutes of being crushed. Okay, so here's another thing. Once you get it and once you crush it, let's say, crush is to pound, to squish, to make flat. Basically, you're just pushing it down because if it's a coarse piece of wasabi, it probably wouldn't taste too good if you ate that just on a piece of fish or something like that. So you'll need to crush it. You'll need to grind it down. But the problem is that it loses its flavor within 15 minutes after you crush it. So you have to eat it very fresh.
Right, so of course you need to go to a high-end restaurant to have fresh wasabi because they'll be willing to crush fresh wasabi for you. But if you go to more mainstream sushi restaurants, that's just not practical. They're going to want to have their wasabi in packets that they can store for several days, and they can bring them out when people need them. So of course you're going to get imitation wasabi at those kinds of restaurants. So as for taste, or in regard to taste, imitation wasabi is mainly spicy and hot. That's the way I like it, actually, but I'm probably ignorant as to what real wasabi is, and I may actually prefer that because I don't think I've ever had it, but real wasabi is spicy, but has more of a fresh signature taste that isn't too intense with the delicate flavor of fish. Remember, wasabi is made to be consumed with raw fish, which is sushi.
Right. So the taste isn't too intense of real wasabi. Right. You know, I like wasabi because if you have a cold, sometimes, you eat it and then you breathe through your nose and then it just clears your head, right? So that's why sometimes having some wasabi when you have a cold can be helpful to you. So yeah, so the taste of real wasabi, or the flavor of real wasabi, flavor is how something tastes, of course. The flavor isn't too intense. Something that's intense is really strong. It knocks you out. It's extreme, E-X-T-R-E-M-E. Okay, so if something's intense, yeah, it's really... You could say it really packs a punch. It really hits you when you eat it. In Taiwan, I often talk about the intense heat or the intense humidity. When you get off the plane and you go, you're right, the minute you walk out of the doors at the airport, especially if it's summertime, the heat is so intense, it just hits you and it knocks you over. It's really different than a lot of places in the world. Okay, so yeah, so the the flavor of real wasabi, it's not that intense. It's more mild. It's spicy, but it doesn't pack that punch.
Maybe more subtle. And again, you're going to use this sauce with fish. Raw fish, of course, is sashimi, which I believe is a kind of sushi. But again, sashimi is raw fish. And of course, as I said, wasabi is mainly supposed to accompany raw fish in a sushi restaurant. And the fish has a delicate flavor, okay? It's very subtle. It's got a flavor that isn't too strong. And of course, there are different kinds of sushi, and there are great connoisseurs for sushi all over the place. So, of course, they're going to want to have their wasabi, the best kind of wasabi they can find, along with their sashimi, their raw fish there. And so, of course, the flavor of fish is delicate. And try to taste real wasabi at least once in your lifetime. Maybe you can put it on your bucket list as something you can do before you die.
Now that you know how unique it is, you'll appreciate it even more. Okay, so something that is unique is one of a kind. There's nothing else like it. You out there, you are unique. There's no one who is exactly like you. You are one of a kind. So the same thing with wasabi. It's really a very, very special kind of food, the real wasabi. And when you know how special or how unique it is, you'll like it even more. You'll appreciate it even more. You'll say, wow, I'm so glad that I've been able to try this wasabi because it's really a very rare thing.
And of course, here in Taiwan, Japanese food is quite popular. And of course, there are going to be some high-end sushi restaurants around somewhere that will probably serve the real thing. But a friend of mine told me that Ali Shan grows some pretty good wasabi too, so I certainly would like to try that as well. And you wouldn't have to import it from Japan if you can get good wasabi right here in good old Taiwan. Let's support the local farmers, shall we? Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. It's time now to listen to our Chinese teacher.
好，那么到底你的瓦萨比呢，是真的还是假的呢？你吃的是真的还是假的瓦萨比？虽然都很辣。好，我们来看一下接下来第3段。如果你的瓦萨比它是浓浓的稠状 thick paste， 那么就是假的。如果是小小粗粗的 coarse pieces， 有一颗一颗，那很有可能是真的哦。好，我们在第3段第2句、第3句这个地方，也就是我们的题目第3题，其实前面的稠稠的糊状跟后面的小小粗粗的一颗一颗，就形成了一个真假相比的对照。所以第3题答案选 C，in contrast 是比较通顺的。那么新鲜的瓦萨米呢，一定要立刻的怎么样？逗点之后，我们看下同样第3段的第4句，逗点之后的 as 是 because， 因为它的风味其实在15分钟之内就会消失了，所以新鲜的瓦萨比呢，要马上的怎么样呢？第4题考你4个单字，那么 C 的这个 consume。其实它就有吃的意思，不过 consume 在语义学当中，它是非常上层的字，不管是吃、喝、用水、用电、消耗纸张、消耗瓦斯、消耗自然资源，都可以用这个字，叫做 consume。好，所以要赶快吃哦。那至于它的味道的话，接下来同样这一段第5句前面2个字的 as for something， 就是谈到另外一个话题。至于味道，那么假的这种山葵呢，比较是腥味跟辣味，但是真正的山葵那种辛辣呢，它是有一种很新鲜的一种独特的味道，就会跟鱼一起吃的话，又不会太过于强烈强调鱼的味道。接下来如果你没有吃过真正的山葵的话，可以试试看哦。第5格的话，其实大家会有一点困扰。那么像 A 跟 D 选项，不管是动词 ing 或者是 to do something， 放在句首的时候，通常都是当主词来使用。那么为什么第5格要选 B 的答案呢？因为 B这一格我们看到一下第7句，这个第5题这一句话其实没有动词。当你看到第5格后面的 to taste 不定词，在英文当中，在句子当中 to do something 可能当名词或者是形容词，但是它就不是动词了，它是一种动作，但它不是动词，所以这一格只剩动词，你必须要用祈使句 try to do something， 也就是说在第5题当中 try to do something 的后面的 to taste 其实是 try 的受词。好，所以如果你真的没有吃过的话，或许可以沾一点点试试看哦。我是安娜，我们下次见。
That's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and do enjoy the real wasabi if you can find it. And hey, write us about it and tell us what it tastes like. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
And I'm Jacob.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.